Ambassador, I don't really read biographies and autobiographies because I have this kind of slightly pompous view, which is that it's a kind of inefficient way of collecting facts. And so reading your book was kind of unusual for me. What it made me think was there's this peculiar thing now, which is that on the one hand, I defer to you enormously. And I wish I'd read this book when I was 20. I might have made something of myself. You know, you're a completely inspirational figure. So I'm kind of down here looking up at you. On the other hand, I know so much more about you than you know about me. So, you know, I've got the upper hand as well, really, because the book is full of, you know, this stuff. Why did you want to write it, and why did you choose to write it in such a kind of open way? I mean, you know, not just this, but there's a whole section in the book about how challenging you found relationships before you met up with our good friend Cass Sunstein, good RSA friend. So why did you decide to share all that stuff?
It's the right question. I mean, I don't know that this book would look this way or have taken this form if, for example, Secretary Clinton had been elected president. You know, I wrote this book in the shadow of current events, shall we say, generously. And I think that we're at a moment where we're not listening to one another all that well. We have each of us, including me, we have our fixed positions. I believed, and now very much believe, that had I written something that was sort of explaining why I think my worldview is preferable to, you know, shunning diversity and shunning allies and shunning values and shunning human rights, you know, I would have been writing that for people who agree with me already, and maybe that's in the end who'll read this book as well. But to tell just a good story, I'm originally Irish, and there were two sort of dimensions of being Irish that were at war in me as I was writing. One was, like, you can't get a word in edgewise at the dinner table if you can't tell a good story, and you lose the attention of even your parents if you trail off or if you don't get your punchline just so. And so that was sort of the inner, from Ireland originally, and you know, I felt compelled to try to tell a story that zoomed and that people would want to be along for the ride on. But there's also a saying that, you know, Irish people have trouble using the first person even in therapy. And I definitely found the I initially just extremely presumptuous to write a memoir, you know, especially one that went back to my Dublin childhood, that went back to being a war correspondent. You know, it was one thing initially when I began working on it, I thought I'll write in the first person because I'll tell a better story that way. I'll overcome that barrier, but I'll only do so in a way that's kind of as it relates to Barack Obama, because Barack Obama is who people are mainly interested in. But then I realized you don't actually care about the character of Samantha if you don't know why she believes what she believes or what drew her to this person, this historic figure in the first place. And so the upshot was, in the end, I felt I needed to go more personal to make the character that happens to be me more relatable. And particularly, you know, you mentioned, yes, I talk about my failed romantic journey, you know, prior to meeting Cass. I talk about IVF and fertility. I've given you one of the most graphic scenes of the book here. But beyond that, I talk about my doubts along the way. And that, as I began to write, came to feel like one of the most important dimensions, because what's happened is, since I had the privilege of representing the United States on the world stage and representing, again, a figure like Barack Obama, I have found myself become less relatable to young people. Like, in other words, I might say, here's an idea for, you know, how one might go about progressing in the next phase on LGBT rights. And I see my students looking at me thinking, yeah, well, that's easy for you to say. You're the former UN ambassador. You know, you can get a New York Times op-ed published. Like, what's my role in all of this? And so by going back to the beginning and by being very open about me asking myself those questions pretty much at every stage. I mean, even Barack Obama has asked himself those questions of, what can one person do? I think that's where people are right now. And so meeting people where they are, in a place where they are activated, a bit horrified, not sure whether anything that either an individual or their set of friends can make a dent in what ails us. that's been the story through human history. But most government memoirs don't open up the inside. I have a saying that actually comes from AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, which is never compare your insides to someone else's outsides. And so what I tried to do in the book is put the insides out there so that people who are asking themselves every day, am I going to activate or am I going to change the channel and watch something other than Brexit, just watch sport or just listen to my music. I want them to know that you're not alone and that we do have a collective action problem. If everybody gets paralyzed by their smallness, we'll be where we are and worse with time. And so that was the enterprise. And so far, at least as it relates to the young people who I've engaged on the book, I think it has achieved that purpose of rendering the larger story of how to make an effort to try to make a difference relatable, and something that people feel that they too can do, that you don't have to be UN ambassador to do your thing.